Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Morgantown Board of Zoning Appeals. Please turn off all cell phones or other devices that may disrupt these proceedings. It is the duty of this board to consider requests of relief or for relief from the requirements of the city's zoning regulations, to consider conditional use permit requests and hear administrative appeals. The board conducts business in the following order: review, amend, and approve minutes of a previous meeting, attend to unfinished business, see to new business, and then move to announcements from staff. Each request is heard in the order that it appears on the agenda. For each conditional use and variance request, the following is done. We will introduce the agenda item, and the planning division will present a staff report, which may or may not offer a recommendation. The applicant will be asked to present their justification for the request, which may include questions by members of the board. We will then open a public hearing to hear testimony in support of or in opposition to the request. Rules regarding public testimony are as follows. Anyone wishing to testify during the public hearing may do so once recognized by the chair, or may, in lieu of oral testimony, submit written testimony to the chair. All recognized speakers must approach the podium, state their name and address for the record, and speak clearly into the microphone. All comments must be addressed to the board, should be relevant to the application, and may not be of a personal nature or personal attacks. All speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. If members of the board have any questions of the speaker, that time will not be counted toward his or her 5 minutes. If there's a large number of speakers, including many who are part of groups or organizations, we may, to avoid repetitive comments, elect to ask for a representative to speak on behalf of the group or organization. Speakers are notified that irrelevant comments or comments of a personal nature or personal attacks may result in the speaker forfeiting his or her opportunity to participate in the proceedings. I may elect to recognize the applicant agent at the end of the public hearing to provide rebuttal, or additional comments, which will be limited to an additional 5 minutes. If members of the board have any questions of the applicant agent, that time will not be counted toward the total of 5 minutes. After all testimony is heard, I will declare the public hearing closed, and no further public comment will be permitted. Uncivil, unruly, and/or disruptive behavior at any time during this meeting is prohibited and will result in removal from this public meeting. State law requires the board to consider findings of fact for each conditional use and variance request. The request cannot be granted unless a majority of the quorum present, and I do note for the record, we do have a quorum present, finds in the positive of all of the findings of fact. The board may elect to continue the hearing to another date if it needs additional information. Applicants and requesting parties will be notified in writing by the planning division of the board's findings and conclusions. Regardless of whether a request is approved or denied, decisions of the board can be appealed to the Circuit Court of Monongalia County within 30 days upon receipt of the written notification. Any work done relating to decisions rendered by this board during that 30-day period is at the sole financial risk of the applicant. Thank you for your consideration and respect for these proceedings and all opinions rendered during the meeting. So we do have minutes, I believe, for the December meeting. Any comments or recommended changes to the meeting minutes for December? I didn't see anything. All right, so we're going to accept the meeting minutes for the December regular meeting as presented in the meeting packet. So let's take roll. Mr. Schomburger. Here. Ms. Cook.
Here.
And Mr. Bennison's here. We do have a quorum, so we can proceed with the meeting. The first case number is V22-23, Nyland Strader, South Point Edition Lot 2, request by Houston Strader on behalf of Richard and Barbara Nyland for variance relief from Article 1333 of the city's Planning and Zoning Code regarding maximum setback requirements.
All right.
Mr. Bonner.
Before I jump into my staff report, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm not sick. I just got the COVID booster a couple of days ago, and it hit me like a bus. So I'm a little bit drainy. I apologize. Okay, so sorry. First item, thank you for the introduction. This is a variance request. For the petitioner is Mr. Strider is submitting a request for variance relief from Article 1333 on behalf of his clients Richard and Barbara Nyland for the construction of a single-family dwelling on the subject property, which is located on South Point Circle. Petitioner is seeking variance relief from the setback standards of the R1 district, which include a maximum setback of 30 feet from the front lot line. The petitioner's clients would like to construct the dwelling more than 30 feet from the front lot line, approximately 90 feet away. The site characteristics, including the width and slope of the parcel, make it difficult to conform with the R1 standards. Staff note that nearby development has also addressed slope issues by placing primary buildings further away from the front lot line. As such, staff recommends approval of the variance as the conceptual placement of the house is consistent with the other nearby developments. It's consistent with the remaining setback requirements and addresses the unique difficult to develop topography here. Here's a picture of the street, approximately where the driveway would be. The house would be located down the slope. As you can see, right at the street is generally the steepest part of the slope, steepest slope of the lot.
Right.
And this is your conceptual site plan of what they're looking at. And then again, I note that all the other setbacks are met, so there's ample space between adjacent and future development in areas to address stormwater runoff and things like that could be a concern on the slope, understandably.
Right.
And that concludes the staff report.
All right. Do we have a representative for this case?
Yep.
Yeah, please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. Whoop, sorry about that.
Houston Strader. My business address, I assume, or the lot
Sure,
address?
that's fine.
Okay, 937 Canyon Road, Morgantown.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to just state my?
Yeah, just provide
Yeah.
an overview and
Okay. Generally speaking, kind of like Rodney said, it's so steep right off the road. I'm just trying to get back far enough so we have a gradual driveway to the garage. So that's pretty simple. It's about 16 to 20 feet in elevation difference from your 30-foot setback to the road.
you can
So-
tell from that photo just how steep it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, and actually, like he said, as you first come down, that's the steepest section. But I feel as if we can get back to about 90 feet, we can kind of come in, kind of sideways to, enable a gradual slope, and then just have a big concrete pad in front of the garage, so they
Right.
can actually turn around and use it. So, because they have a couple low cars, and that would make it pretty difficult, scraping and whatnot. So. Essentially, but yeah, we're pretty much hugging the setback on the left, as you can see, and then we're nowhere near it on the sides or on the other side and on the rear. So
Yeah. So even to the left, you're outside of the, or you're in compliance with a 10-foot.
everything but the front. Yep.
And then it's out of our purview, but are you going to be able to address drainage?
Yeah, I actually met with Mub out there 2 weeks ago, and we kind of just went over everything we're going to do. I got the green light from them as far as we're going to do a berm at the bottom of the property and actually have stormwater that ties into the street below come up and then kind of catch all of the stormwater and whatever during construction, and then eventually create swells on the left side and the right side to come down, kind of hit that berm and also go in the same drain. And that also will catch the foundation drains and the downspout on the house. So, yeah. So I guess in essence, we just don't want a super steep driveway.
And the build is consistent, the setback you're looking for is consistent with the rest of the
Yes,
nearby
yeah.
sites, right?
I don't know if he has pictures. I actually I went through the neighborhood and took several photos. But I mean, you can see how far back a lot of those houses are. Some of them are probably around 90-ish feet, and then they've also turned the houses to give them more length as well. You know what I mean? So just super steep is the problem.
Right.
And I mean, you could probably achieve being a little closer, but the cost to, build a 16 or 20-foot foundation isn't feasible. You know what I mean? Then you end up with giant retaining walls, and it's more work than what it's worth if we could just get, a little bit further back off the property line. So that's kind of it in short.
All right. Any questions? All right, thank you for
Yep.
your
No
presentation.
problem.
I mean, it seems fairly straightforward.
Do we want to open
And
a
it's,
on.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do we want a public hearing then discuss?
Yeah. All right, for this case, for V22-23, we're going to open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of or in opposition to this case, please do so now. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Bonner, do you have any additional commentary?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
There's a clear hardship. Seems fairly straightforward.
And it's not really, it's consistent with other properties that have been developed to date within the development. Yeah, we did close it. Yeah, we just closed it. Do we have any questions about addressing the findings of fact? They seemed fairly,
So I move that we accept the findings of facts as stated in the packet.
Second?
okay. So we have a motion to accept the findings of fact for case V22-23 with a second support from Logan, from Mr. Schomburger. Do we have a motion?
I move that we grant the variance.
Okay, I will second that. So we have a motion to grant the variance for case number V22-23.
To accept the findings of fact first.
We have
Oh,
to
wait,
vote on
we-
the findings
Oh,
of fact.
okay.
We forgot to vote on that.
Okay, so we need a vote to accept the findings of fact firstly. So we have a motion to accept the findings of fact. We have a second. Let's take a roll call vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have accepted the findings of fact for case number V22-23. Let's re-enter that motion to grant the variance.
I re-enter the motion to grant the variance.
Okay, so we have a motion to grant the variance for case V22-23. And do you want to go ahead? And
Yeah,
I'll,
second.
I'll second that.
Good.
We have a second. All those in favor of
Aye.
granting
Aye.
the variance? All right, so, sir, Mr. Strader?
Yes, sir.
You've granted your variance for your case. Keep in mind, you will receive written notification from planning, typically within a week or so. But please keep in mind that it's subject to,
Yeah, isn't it like 30 days?
it's a 30-day period. So any work that you do in that 30-day period, from the time that you receive written notification through to that end of the period, you do at your own financial risk.
Got it.
So thank you for coming down tonight. Your variance has been granted. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Have a good evening. Next case is V22-24. Kalen Warman, Vintner Manor Development. Request by Mike Callen on behalf of the Warmans for variance relief from Article 1333 of the city's Planning and Zoning Code regarding minimum setback requirements in the R1 Single Family Residential District, City Tax District 15, City Tax Map 53, parcels 127 through 128 in the R1 Single Family Residential District.
Okay, I'll be representing Mr. Callen. He wasn't able to make it tonight. Unfortunately, he was one of the ones that was supposed to go January, so understandably, he wasn't expecting to be here tonight.
Right.
So I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Okay.
So that said, Mr. Callen seeking variance relief from, again, Article 1333, this time considering the minimum setbacks in the R1 single-family district for this Vintner Manor development. A little background here, there's some history. This was a consolidation of about 2.5, 3 parcels into 7. In 2019 and 20, minor subdivisions were approved for the creation of the 7 revised parcels that we have today. On March 18th, 2020, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved variance case V2004 for lots A, B, and C, providing the 5 feet relief from the same R1 minimum front and rear setback. The petitioner is just seeking the same relief for the subsequent lots. So these lots didn't exist at the time he applied for the variance. It was essentially a serial partition due to the way that the lots were acquired. So as the houses are looking in on themselves, it's essentially almost a little planned development on its own. And for those reasons, given the precedent across the private drive, staff recommends approval of the variance as the placement of the private road appears to interfere with strict R1 residential zone development requirements. And staff recommends that said approval include the condition that development of Lot E, which is at the corner of Collins Ferry and the private drive, meet the side yard setbacks in accordance with Section 1333, subsection 4, subsection B, as they relate to corner lots specifically. And that concludes the staff report. This just kind of helps lay out I'll add briefly that this shows the current configuration. So all 3 lots across the street were approved. He's just looking for the consistent development pattern with these 2 remaining lots near the front.
And so the initial approval for A, B, and C, that was 2019, right?
20.
20?
Yeah, March 18th, 20.
Oh, I see, okay.
That approval included that same condition for the corner lot, Lot A, in this picture. Corner lots have a additional 5 feet from the other street. So it's 15 feet, a 15-foot setback from Collins Ferry.
So the first tier of lots, how much time elapsed between, were they acquired?
A few, it was months. It was really
It was
close.
months? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, there's consistency in both
Yeah,
cases.
I'd say it's
with respect
consistent,
to-
and it's a high-quality development. I mean, these are really nice houses. It creates like a little mini neighborhood on the street.
I've seen it.
They are smaller lots. I mean, they're a little tight, so, and it's
But they
not a
meet-
public street, so
But they do meet minimum lot requirements?
I would have to check on that.
Is that an additional?
That's outside of this. They're already there. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at that. I didn't really look at that because the lots exist.
Anyway,
so.
never mind, I'm sorry. Just. Any questions? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. I mean, they're,
Public hearing? Or did-
yeah, let's go ahead and, all right, we're gonna go ahead and open the public hearing for this case number V22-24, Kalen Warman, Vintner Manor Development. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of or in opposition to this case, please take the opportunity to speak now. Seeing no one, we're gonna close the public hearing. I
I
mean,
move we accept the findings of facts as stated in the packet.
yeah.
I second.
So we have a motion to accept the findings of fact, all four findings of fact for case number V22-24 with a second by Mr. Schomburger. Let's take roll call. All those in favor of accepting the findings of fact? Aye. Those findings of fact have been accepted. Do we have a motion to grant the variance?
Yes, I move we grant the variance with the staff recommendations as to meet the residential zone development requirements. Is that how I need to state it, Mr. Bond?
That's fine.
Okay.
And we should note there is
With the
a recommended
conditions,
condition
that's what I meant.
that's referenced on page 32 of this meeting packet. And that condition is said approval shall include the condition that development of Lot E as indicated on the survey plat associated with the MNS 20-02 Callan, referenced the Collins Ferry Road address, meets side yard setbacks in accordance with section 1332.04 subsection B as they relate to corner lots. And that is specifically a minimum of a 15-foot side yard setback. That is the condition. So we have a motion
In a second.
to accept that, subject to the condition as referenced in the packet. Did you second, Mr. Schomburger?
I thought you did.
All right, I'm gonna second that motion. So we have a motion to grant the variance for this case, V22-24, with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the variance for this case number V22-24, Callan Warman Vintner Manor Development has been granted. You will advise the applicant, Mr. Bonner, and via written communication, and you'll remind him that at his sole financial risk. All right, so the next case that we have is V22-25, Free Methodist Church, 310 Mississippi and 700 West Virginia Avenue. Request by Christopher Barnum on behalf of the Free Methodist Church for variance relief from Article 1335 of the city's planning and zoning code regarding setback requirements and lot provisions, City Tax District 09, Tax Map 40, Parcel 188, in the R1A Single Family Residential District.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. Just to reiterate, this is a request for variance relief made by the Free Methodist Church. Christopher Barnum filed the request on behalf of the church, and the church is seeking variance relief from Article 1335 of the city's planning and zoning code regarding R1A setback requirements and lot provisions, as well as variance relief from Table 1365-0401 regarding required off-street parking spaces. This is for a request for property, as the chair noted, at 310 Mississippi and 700 West Virginia Avenue. The property consists of 8,000 square feet and currently contains two non-conforming structures, a church facility and small single-family dwelling. Neither structure currently has off-street parking, but the church owns a gravel lot across the street, across West Virginia Avenue. The church is seeking to subdivide the property into two parcels, A and B. A would contain the church and encompass approximately 4,691 square feet, and parcel B would contain the single-family dwelling and encompass 3,309 square feet. The Morgantown Planning Commission has approved the minor subdivision application, but due to the size of the existing lot and the proximity of the non-conforming structures, several deficiencies were noted by the Planning Commission. And their approval was contingent upon 6 conditions, 3 of which were this variance application. So the petitioner is seeking variance relief for the above references. According to the petitioner, the buildings have existed for decades with no apparent detriment to the neighborhood. Staff understands that the recent subdivision approval and request for variance relief is to prepare the structures for sale. And regarding the requested variance relief for parking, the requirement to provide off-street parking is due to the change of use from for the dwelling from a parsonage caretaker residence to a standalone single-family dwelling. Since the use is changing, it's supposed to meet parking requirements. As noted, no parking exists on the single-family parcel, and creating parking is difficult, if not impossible. All that said, staff recommends the board evaluate the proposal and ensure that they meet the standards, the standard criteria. Staff proposed some minor changes to the findings of fact provided in the application, and with those, staff would recommend granting the variance relief from minimum lot size, maximum lot coverage, minimum side setbacks, and minimum off-street parking requirements without conditions. That concludes the staff report.
All right. All right, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Bonner. Do we have a representative for this case? Please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Christopher Barnum, and my business address is at 1714 Mile Ground. And then the whole reason behind this subdivision request is the church would like to sell the two properties separately. And the 1902 plat has the lot lines going straight through the middle of the buildings instead of between the buildings. So hence we had to request for a subdivision. The current occupants of the parsonage, the planner was talking about, actually still do park on the street. They don't use the lot that the church has. So that wouldn't change at all. I mean, that the area of the parsonage is the green area is very limited in what we could do with a parking space. So we'd like to continue to have them park on the street. There's really no new uses for these properties planned. They just would like to sell them separately.
Right.
They've been approached by two potential buyers. The buyers didn't want both properties. One wanted one property, one wanted the other. So that's why we're here.
So your hardship is solely financial.
Pardon me?
The hardship is solely financial.
Right. Yes.
Thank you.
Which isn't necessarily self-created. So do the occupants, are they applying for on-street parking permitting, tags or decals?
I don't know that answer.
I'm
Can you
not
speak
sure
to
that
that?
this is a regulated parking on these streets. I don't.
It's not regulated.
The,
Okay.
the curb is not blue on the other side, if that's what
Right.
is usually the permit part.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. That the curb is painted. Mr. Bonner, can you speak to whether, I mean, is that, in terms of restricted parking, is that likely to change over time at all? To try to address the parking
I mean,
concern?
I guess anything's possible. I'm not aware of any conversations to regulate parking in this neighborhood. And I'm not aware of any conflicts with parking in this neighborhood.
Right. I think that's my area of concern is the parking. Now and in the future. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Do you have any questions now, or
We'll do the public hearing. and then
want to do the public hearing? All
discuss.
right. All right, we're going to take this opportunity to open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to this case, now is your opportunity to do so. This is for V22-25 Free Methodist Church. Seeing no one, we're going to close the public hearing.
I have nothing further to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right.
Planning Commission had concerns about this. Could you expound on those further again?
I mean, overall, they approved it. They did talk about parking and the gravel lot across the street and what would happen to that. The current policy is that a new use in the church would require that parking lot to be updated, which I know was a concern, and since it's gravel currently. We prefer to have paved lots to keep the gravel from going onto the street. That was, I mean, I wasn't at the hearing, meets the objectives of the comprehensive plan, so they approved it with the conditions that you also agree that it's worth considering these variances.
I mean, but we are creating but the dwelling is very close.
Right.
To, I mean, is there an easement in place between the two?
I believe there is an
terms
access easement going down
Because-
the new lot line, correct?
That's an excellent point, Mr. Stone. Because, I mean, the property boundary, that's been reoriented too.
Yeah, I cut it off. Yeah,
was it-
there's an access easement running down the new lot line, essentially encompassing an existing sidewalk that goes up. So the access easement includes the steps and goes back, and then that sidewalk runs between the two structures. So that easement is already proposed on the plat.
Because at most, I mean, the distance between the structures, at most, it looks like it's at most 8 feet.
I drove by it. It's
And
fairly,
I should have asked this before we open, well,
actually, we can.
did you,
5.8 feet between them.
okay, yeah. So that's, I mean, in terms of, if the new property line is running, if the new boundary has been reoriented basically perpendicular to the original, in terms of the side yard setbacks, that's problematic. Did planning, did they ask for the plat or the plot to be surveyed at all?
It already has been surveyed.
It has been
Yeah,
surveyed.
the plat is on, well, I zoomed in on page 44 of your packet is
Okay.
a zoomed in
Right.
plat.
Yeah, I didn't see that plat map dated, so I just thought I'd ask that question. So, I mean, the side yard setback, that is and we
It's-
can't really comment on whether whoever purchases the property is gonna elect to demolish. That's really outside our purview.
Well, but
But-
I mean, if that is, for the dwelling, if the structure were to be raised, could another dwelling, is it big enough to support another structure dwelling?
We could formulate a condition speaking to that possible eventuality.
Sure. They would either need to come in, future development would either need to seek a new variance
Yeah.
for the new
That would be
structure.
preferable, I think.
They would have to do that for a new building. I certainly think a creative architect could design a compliant building if there was a new house built.
Just,
The
yeah,
lot
just,
width is 30 feet, so
yeah.
you would have a 20-foot wide house. That's totally doable.
To maybe to improve, like if the structure were raised and a new structure built, maybe build it in, with a nod to the maximum lot coverage limitations presented by the dimensions of the lots.
What about stormwater? Like, is that something we can
That's
consider?
planning. Can you
Well,
speak to that?
stormwater's MUB, I would say that the buildings exist and the lot line configuration doesn't change what stormwater does.
Okay.
And future development would have to obviously comply with MUB's stormwater. So if anything, that would improve it in the future if there's new development, assuming there's an issue to begin with.
On the other hand, if we do formulate a condition, we don't want to formulate it in such a way that we're impinging on either the next purchaser or future purchasers, their ability to develop the lot as they see fit,
Right.
within, with respect to zoning regulations.
I have a very hard time with the parking.
Yeah, that's
Ju-
mine.
Just because of where it's located in the neighborhood. You've got Mundy's down the street,
Mhm.
and people park up there.
Yeah, the church has has at least parking on the adjacent lot. It's the parsonage with just nothing but on-street parking that I
That's-
have a problem with,
That
more than the church structure.
Yeah, I
So, I mean,
and I hate
Is-
to say the magic word, but you know, it does seem like in splitting this, it is creating the issue of the parking itself.
Right.
It is kind of a inherited, self-imposed hardship.
and if the city decides in future to impose restrictions with respect to on-street parking, that's gonna put the property owners at the parsonage property in a corner.
Yeah,
And we have to consider that eventuality too. Is there any way to?
I would think that if if the city decided to regulate parking on this street, the permitted parking would be guaranteed at least one or two for the actual property owner.
It would just be grandfathered
Any
in?
property owner.
Well, yeah, they get
Yeah,
first
they can't tell
dibs.
you you can't park on your street for your house. In
Right.
other words.
Right. All right. And you, Mr. Blount, you did say that if one or both of the structures are raised for redevelopment, those property owners would have to come before both planning conceivably and zoning.
Sure, so any change that happens to the structures, if it's an addition, would have to meet the code, or they would have to come seek a new variance. If any building was demolished and new construction occurred, that would also need to meet the current code, or they would have to come seek a variance.
So with respect to not taking into account, not even considering conditions, but with respect to the minimum side setback, is that plus or minus 2.5 feet? Is that enough? Because you said the easement is
Yeah,
5.8.
parcel B is the closest at 2.5 feet. It's currently 2.5 feet from the proposed new property line. So 5 feet is the minimum in this zone.
Okay, so the 2.5 is enough. It's still really tight.
it's,
I mean, those are my two sticking points, is the side yard setback and the parking.
I mean, this just seems like a headache waiting to happen. That's just like, yeah.
So,
Hey, Ms. Cook, go
well, I
ahead,
guess
weigh
my
in,
question would
please.
be, so it's been noted in the case that parking has always been pretty much on-street in past years.
Mhm.
So by dividing it, how many parking spaces have to be provided, or would be provided on-street? Is it more once it's divided?
That's a good question.
So would it be?
Per household.
Yes, or per building? That would be my question.
I have to check.
Isn't it 3?
I'm not aware of the code on that.
Two.
It's only
Yep,
2.
on the table. Minimum off-street parking for a single-family dwelling is 2 spaces. They request a variance of 2.
Okay. So when you say they're requesting a variance of 2, so if you divide the buildings, don't you have to offer 2 more? Or I'm just trying to clarify here.
So the division, a caretaker's residence or parsonage can't exist on a separate lot. It has to be part of another development. So when you create the new lot, that caretaker's residence parsonage now becomes a standalone single-family dwelling, which is considered a change in use. Although it's kind of a regulatory change in use,
Okay.
they could keep using it for that. That's how the planning commission treated it. Now that, because it is a new use of an existing building, it still needs to come into conformance, so they would need to provide the 2 parking spots, was their approach, my understanding, so.
Okay, okay.
And that minimum, maximum of 2, it's not based on square footage or area.
No,
of the
just
structure.
single families,
It's
too.
just per structure.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
That's a good question, though. Let's see.
I mean, I'll just be frank. It seems like well, personally, I think they should just raise the second building, but in the absence of that, we're dividing this property up. We're asking for parking variance. We're asking for this really small side setback thing. And this is so the current owners have the ability to sell it.
Mhm.
And that I acknowledge staff's correction to that, but that's not something we accept as a hardship. And I have a very hard time seeing a hardship when this division seems to be creating a lot of hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I put in the staff report, financial hardships shouldn't be a sole,
Right,
financial
because-
considerations aren't a sole hardship, but if it's true that it's like nearly impossible to sell, they could have a case that we are, by denying them
But-
pretty much any economic use unless they have to go through and
But-
demolish everything.
But that's the point, maybe. The applicant hasn't demonstrated that.
I mean, I'd say they've demonstrated that 2 owners have approached buying it and would like to buy it if the properties are
Separately.
separate.
As separate
That's
parcels.
not nothing.
But it's outside of our purview.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's outside of your purview. It's the basis by which you might deny the application.
Well, my thought is that the planning commission has already granted it with conditions.
Right.
I think the 2 parking spaces that would be granted with the property is not unreasonable. If I were selling the property, I would want the same grace granted to me if available. We can say that economic hardship is not, but, economic hardship can be hard anytime, depending on where you are in life. So I move that we I move that we accept the findings of facts. I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything that was unreasonable.
And
in
with
them.
with respect to the findings of fact, I would just like to state for the record that I agree with the statement in the first finding of fact. There should, I would change should to there will be, I would agree, absolutely no adverse effect to the public health, safety, welfare, or rights of adjacent property owners. I would tend to agree with that statement.
There you go.
But what about future property owners? Specifically the church next door.
I guess one of the key questions is if we agree to the subdivision, is that really going to materially
Affect them.
affect the character of the neighborhood? Probably not. Right?
My thought would be no, because you already have the buildings. You've had them there since at least 1908 or whatever.
And I'm, just
Yeah.
for the record, I want to state for the record, I'm not comfortable with, in terms of maximizing profit, that doesn't sit well with me. Because it
I
just,
understand your thought too.
I mean, on that basis, I
But that-
can't accept findings of fact 3 and 4,
3 and 4, okay.
which were corrected by staff, but
Well, how would you word them? Is there,
that's not on me.
Or is there a wording to?
I mean, what I see here is just hardship being created due to this subdivision,
Mhm.
when conceivably the structures could be sold together. I just,
Mhm.
yeah, I can't, it just, I can't accept 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. Can you suggest additional conditions
Or-
in addition to those provided for by the planning commission? I really can't see
Yeah.
any. Apart from, I mean, if the parking is an issue, maybe providing for parking, you know, you'd have to do it to the right of the parsonage structure for off-street parking, just as a suggestion.
The parking is my biggest issue. There is nowhere on the lot the parking can be put.
Because it's not as if there's an alley that runs along the rear of the.
I think there's like a small like back alley with like.
Oh, really?
Isn't there?
There is.
That would run parallel to Mississippi then.
But then there's no, I think,
If there is an alley that runs behind, we'd have to create some kind of easement. If we're gonna agree to the subdivision, we'd have to provide for some easement across the other property. You know what I mean? So that this property owner could turn right and then turn right again, the alley, to access the parking area behind the structure.
Can you walk me through that again? I'm sorry.
So,
Well-
if you look at the map, the dwelling is the smaller building in the red square. There you can see the alley. So the alley exists. I'm not sure of the condition, but it's there. So you wouldn't need an easement across the church's property to access
You wouldn't? Okay.
parking.
It's-
I
the
think
alley
it's
isn't-
difficult on the backside behind.
Yeah.
There might be 8-9 feet. Otherwise, you'd have to put parking in the front lawn.
Right.
I mean, when this came in, I was a little perplexed as well. But the way I look at it is, both of these buildings have existed for 50 years, if not longer, without issue. We didn't receive any neighborhood issues or complaints or concerns. No phone calls, no letters or emails. The proposed subdivision doesn't change the configuration or use of the properties. All it does is change the ownership configuration, just the way that the buildings are owned.
I mean, but that's the core of it, though, right? The structures have existed for 100 years or whatever, but they've existed as part of the same plot
On the same yeah.
and under the same ownership.
Right.
And I do see a potential concern for future owners here.
So I guess by denying it, you're saying that either one or two or all the buildings have to be demolished and the lot has to stay at the size that it is, or whoever buys and sells this has to retain both buildings together. So to me, the hardship is the desire to separate the buildings. There's no other configuration. There's no other way to separate these buildings without this. This is the only way you can do it.
Because yeah.
So alternatively,
in
you're
other-
saying that they're stuck with both buildings.
Right,
And you-
or in
and you're
other
saying that
words,
that's okay.
if we don't sign on, if we don't agree to the subdivision, then the current property owner is stuck with, I've got this plot, and to make it developable, my next step is potentially demolition of one or both. And that, I would argue, is not a self-created hardship.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then you're opening the door on, that's truly a hard demolition. That can be kind of costly.
Yeah. I would like to add to that,
So it's kind of a catch-22 there.
when we say that we're putting a hardship on future use, I mean, when someone buys a property, they determine as a buyer what hardship they're willing to take on or non-hardship.
Because then it's
So
an
you-
as-is situation.
Yeah, I mean, you decide when you buy it. If you don't want the hardship, or if you don't want what that property involves, you go on to the next one. So us determining what's good for future buyers or it isn't, so we
We
just have to.
can't really know. In a way, we can't really know.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to determine, are we gonna separate them and move forward and do parking or whatever we want to be done. But, I don't even know that we really I mean, they have a lot they could park in or whatever, but even so, but I think the lot's down the road. But anyway,
Yeah, across the
um,
street.
So if you are going down the route of denial, I just want to remind you that, as you determine whether the proposed request meets the standard criteria for a variance, if you disagree with the petitioner's findings of fact and determine that the proposed request does not meet the standard criteria for a variance, the board must state your own findings of fact and
Right.
conclusions on which it based its decision to deny the subject
Yeah.
variance petition.
Right. So you have to,
say why you're gonna.
if you don't agree with the findings of fact, then the burden is on you to state why. The presented findings of fact, the case doesn't meet them, and then you have to propose, state clearly why, and almost propose alternate findings, an alternate finding of fact
to
for
adjust it.
point 3 and point 4.
Mhm.
Can we require
Um,
one space of off-street parking?
Like,
Sure.
yeah, immediately to the right of the,
You can condition whatever you want within reason.
because, let's see.
The reason I would want some sort of off-street parking here is just, we don't want. Yeah.
In terms of parking, what's the set dimension for like in a commercial?
I don't know
lot?
if there's
Is
a
it
set
8 foot
dimension.
by, is it
There-
8 by?
They could make
12?
it, I'm not sure. That's really a Public Works. That's what they look at.
Because there is, I mean, from the front property line to the front facade, unless I'm misreading it, it's almost 21 feet. So not that you'd want to put the parking right in front of the structure, but down the side of the structure. So maybe we could ask for an 8 foot by 24 foot. If you want to drop an imaginary rectangle on that corner of the property as an additional condition, and they just landscape it
Yeah.
for parking.
I'm-
I'd be comfortable with that
I-
because again, parking is,
I'd be comfortable with that because it would bring it, if we're moving it into an R1A, we should at least attempt to
Give it
remain
parking.
close to the standard.
yeah, no, I agree.
Otherwise, why do we have the standard?
Right.
You know?
Because you're absolutely right. We don't want to be setting a, not that there's you have this exact same situation in the surrounding neighborhood, but then we set the precedent and then someone one street over, oh, I have this lot, and oh, by the way, I can't do this, that, the other thing. Well, there was this case back in 2023, and they set that precedent. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, parking is one of my, it's a sticking point.
I can get past the side setback, but it's the parking.
So how do you wanna change it? So what
Do you
we
wanna,
Well, let's have a look here.
so with respect to your concerns regarding parking, which finding of fact is most relevant? And we can just
adjust?
formulate the condition and reference whichever finding of fact you think is most relevant to you, to that particular concern. Maybe the last one, since it's specifying R1A zoning.
I don't think you have to pick the condition, which finding of fact is
Is most
triggering the
relevant.
condition. You can just propose a condition.
Just propose. So do you,
And
I-
granting the
before you
variance.
get, if I may, before you go too far down the route, I would just perhaps ask the petitioner if they think that's feasible, if that's something they would agree to. I mean, might not have a huge choice, but just to understand with having that site knowledge more than I do, if that is feasible to accommodate an additional one parking spot.
Wanna call them back up?
yeah, would you like to reapproach and address that,
In other words, if they're not interested in it at all,
right?
how
Is
much
that
time
a
you wanna spend
possibility
debating
for
the
you?
condition?
I,
Not to
For my
complicate
cl-
your buying, selling timeline with
Yeah.
prospective clients, but
I don't know what the potential buyer has in mind. The only thing, if my client or if I were keeping that property, it has very limited green space to begin with. And if you if you require a parking space, the front I don't think works because it would just not
Ruin
look
it.
good. Yeah, it would ruin it. The side, there's an alley that goes along the side, and the building is 12 point some odd feet from the edge of the alley. So now you're going to start maybe clogging up the alley with a car sitting there and people going in and out of the alley. And then behind the house, you can't see it from this, but on the plat, there's a wood fence that encloses the backyard
right.
for extra green space or the green space that they have. So if you require the parking space to go there, now you're taking away any
The
green
privacy
space that
fence.
they have.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, on the plat, you can see right where it says Lot 2, that's the backyard.
I'm gonna picture. Okay.
And again, it's about, is that like a enclosed porch? Or the hipped where it's the dashed line? Is that like a covered porch
I
there?
think it's a covered porch, I don't think it's enclosed.
Yeah, see, I didn't see.
It's really
the-
tight. That's not even 20 feet. That's
I
more
didn't
like
see where
12
it said
foot.
wood fence before. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sure.
So it is really tight.
And it's got a wood fence around it. That would mean tearing down the fence too.
Well, it's better than tearing down a structure.
It is.
It's,
It is. I agree.
I mean, that'd be wide enough right behind the house there, but it looks like it's barely enough for two cars
well, require one.
from side to side.
I would-
You want to go with one?
I would-
Okay,
I would.
well,
I would require one.
and then that's where you want to site the parking area? That looks like it's most feasible back there.
If I might, I would.
Go ahead.
If this is the condition you would like to go with, I would just say provide a parking spot on the lot. It's up to them to determine where. And they'll have to work with Public Works and do a building permit to make sure that parking spot meets the Public Works' requirements. There's no zoning, for a single-family dwelling, there's not any zoning standards related to single-family parking spots.
Okay.
I personally do not want a parking spot because I understand any property that, first of all, the fence, the green space, their garden, but
Yeah, there's no,
Um,
outside the structure living space left then.
And I think when we're talking about hardships, I think notably, you've mentioned that that would create a hardship overall. Alley, interruption, lot, that would, you
And
know, where we could just keep parking on the road and be done.
And then
My
two,
my
if the wooden fence were to remain in place in terms of like safely backing out into the alley,
Mhm.
that creates issues too.
Mhm. So I think it might be harder, and I
Just-
understand parking, because I'm off-street parking, because I hate having to go, but, I mean, I think there are, very reasonable cases to not, you know, to not require
Yeah,
that.
I mean, just a different way to consider it. There's nothing stopping the current or future tenants or owners from putting parking in if they so
Right, if they want it,
desire.
if they want it, right.
I live in an apartment without off-street parking and 2 cars, so
Right. But it's,
it's not unheard of in Morgantown.
Right, and that,
so, again, just to recap, historically, with respect to this property, you're talking off-street parking, generally.
On,
I don't, or
On-street
on-street,
parking.
I'm sorry, thank you,
Right.
on-street parking. And I live kind of close to this neighborhood, and that's true of this property, but also the surrounding area. A lot of property owners go with the on-street parking. Just with
and
respect.
even ones that have driveways do on-street
Right,
parking.
exactly,
so.
that's what I mean. With respect to this general neighborhood, a lot of it is off-street,
It is.
or on-street parking.
And I don't think it's I mean, what is it, I don't think it's unreasonable to, you know, for two cars, you know, to park out there.
In front of the house.
Yeah, you know, even if it was 2 additional, but they're already there, so you're not really adding any parking,
Right.
or, you know, adding any cars to the road.
And the on-street can accommodate the minimum of 2 vehicles for this, you know, for the parsonage, for both structures.
Yeah.
So, do we have a motion to accept? Or how would you like to proceed, Mr. Scheinberger?
Yeah,
I mean, we don't have to vote unanimously.
that's true. So I'm gonna move we accept the findings of fact as stated in the packet.
Thank you, sir.
So just to clarify.
Go ahead.
Do you want to accept the petitioner's findings of facts, or do you want to accept the findings of, are you moving to accept the findings of facts with the proposed modifications that staff suggested?
And you're talking about driveway, right?
No, I just put,
Wait a minute.
in the staff report on page
For the planning commission.
46.
On that table,
Yeah, so
No, just,
staff created,
so under staff recommendation, I called out findings of fact number 3 and 4 and just showed where I would perhaps propose some modifications to those.
Oh,
So you would move to accept with staff's modifications?
yes, I move that we accept them with staff modifications, yes.
and I will second that. So the staff modifications, just to reference the page numbers, page 46 and 47 of the meeting packet with respect to the 3rd and 4th finding of fact. So I just seconded your motion to accept. So we have a second. How do we vote? Mr. Schombarger?
no,
Ms. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Dennison, yes. But that has to be unanimous, right?
I don't know. It just
No.
has to be the majority.
Majority, okay.
and I do want to state for the record, now that we've had this discussion, which has been very good, condition 2 specifically, the variance arises from special conditions, that were not created by the person seeking the variance. I would say I disagree with that, for the record.
Okay.
Self-created insofar as
Yes.
they're seeking to subdivide. So in
Yes.
your view, it is self-created. Okay. Do we have a motion?
You have to vote, I mean, we have to,
We did. We just voted on to accept.
But we
And
said
they
it
were
passed. Okay,
accepted
okay,
because
okay.
Mr. Bonner clarified that
you're right. you're
it's
right.
the majority of the vote, not a unanimous vote.
Right,
And it was just to clarify, given my reason for my no.
you're fine, that's good.
So.
I move we grant the variance.
So,
And it's, I believe it says without condition, right?
The staff didn't propose any conditions.
Yeah. So I'm moving to grant the variance without conditions of
Mhm.
parking or otherwise.
right. And I will second that motion to grant the variance for case number V 22-25. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And one nay vote.
Nay.
Yeah, because if you vote, if you don't vote
Yeah.
in support of your
Motion
voting, yeah.
granted.
So, we have granted your variance for your case V 22-25. You will receive written confirmation generally within a week or so. But please keep in mind that any work that you do in that 30-day period, because it can be appealed to the circuit court, you do that work at your sole financial risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening, sir. All right, we're moving on to the next case, which is V 23-01, Lane's Chicken Fingers, 461 High Street. Request by Harold Myers on behalf of Lane's Chicken Fingers for variance relief from Article 1369 concerning signage, lighting, and design standards. City Tax District 11, Tax Map 26, Parcel 73 in the B2 General Business District.
So it should be
Please.
B4. If I put B2, it was I did put B2. Sorry, it's B4.
Oh, it's
Downtown.
B4? All right, we're gonna note that change,
Yep.
or the correction to the district number. It's actually B4 General Business District.
Oh, right. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So this is a request for two signs, one on the front of the building facing High Street and one on the rear facing what is now currently a parking lot.
Parking area.
And then behind the parking lot, you would encounter Chestnut. Petitioner is, the signs total approximately 46 square feet, requiring variance for size. The downtown sign standards also do not permit internal illumination. The applicant is seeking internal illumination, and to accomplish internal illumination, they're seeking the variance for materials. Staff recommends approving the variance as it would appear consistent with the existing adjacent signage in the downtown area, and staff do not believe that would negatively impact the appearance of downtown, and staff concurs with the petitioner's findings of fact. And again, just to reiterate, we have a B4 surrounded by B4 here, and in your staff packet, you can see the front sign and a smaller sign on the rear of the building. And this elevation concept shows the approximate size in relation to the nearby Chase and Chipotle signage. So this would appear to be rather consistent with that, and in staff's view, it helps create a consistent visual aesthetic. And that concludes staff report.
Thank you. Do we have a representative for this case? Please approach, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Harold Myers. I'm Melwood Ave, Pittsburgh, PA. I'm the architectural project manager for the project. I also represent the franchisee, Lane's Chicken, and the franchisor, which is TMD Holdings, 3E franchise. So we looked at the site and determined that if we could, based on the variance and of the surrounding signage, allow us to adjust the variance for the square footage and match the existing area as it is. And the opportunity to provide a sign on the rear, which is multiple parking in that space, which then would enhance the use of the restaurant.
Is there rear entrance back there?
Yes, there
Okay.
will be a rear entrance.
Okay.
And it's consistent in materials to the one that's already existing?
Yes.
Okay.
It's currently in construction right now.
Mm-hmm.
Should be roughly the mid-April opening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So. I mean, they're asking for roughly double, in terms of the sign, the area, it's double the permitted.
Mhm.
But it's not,
Yeah.
out of proportion with,
No, it's not.
It's
all.
it's consistent with the other two businesses.
Mhm.
and then in terms of materials, for the franchise, at other locations,
This
I
is
mean,
the standard,
it's standard with
Yes.
respect to
Yeah.
materials?
pretty much. This will be the first Lane's Chicken outside of Texas.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. So the franchise is 3E franchise, which will be running it, is plans on using this as a stepping stone to do more towards Pittsburgh.
Right.
So this would be your
They chose
note to the
Morgantown.
city having the first
Yeah.
Lane's Chicken.
And I don't really have trouble with the illumination. I mean, in terms of the core of downtown,
Everybody's
it's
starting.
reasonable.
Mhm.
I have no further questions.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of or in opposition to case number V23-01, now's your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we're going to close. Mr. Bonner, do you have any additional?
Nope, I think
It's-
you had some great points. I don't have anything to add.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to,
It's fairly straightforward.
yeah. Yeah, I don't see, so,
I move that we accept the findings of fact as stated by the applicant in the packet.
I second.
all right, so we have a motion to accept the findings of fact for case number V23-01. We have a second from Ms. Cook. How do we vote? Aye. We have accepted the findings of fact, and I move that we grant the variance for this case, V23-01.
I'll second.
We have a motion to grant the variance, and we have a second. How do we vote?
Aye.
All in favor, your variance is granted. You will receive a written confirmation, the granting of your variance, typically 7 and 10 business days. But do keep in mind that any work conducted in that 30-day period that's subject to appeal by the circuit court, you do at your own financial risk. Thank you. Thank you for coming to Morgantown with your first out-of-state location.
So I do have a question.
By all means.
So the question is basically, since we are set back in the corner, visually, do we need a variance to do other kind of signage like blades or anything like that?
If it's like a windblown blade, unfortunately, they're not permitted.
Not permitted in
And
the
you
city?
can't get a variance to not permitted signs.
What about the,
Sandwich boards are permitted downtown as long as they don't block, reasonably.
okay, because it's just set back a little bit, traffic, we
Are
just
you-
want to try.
So you're contemplating the,
No, I'm just,
In front
as a thought, further down the road, when we open up for grand opening and
Right.
stuff like that,
oh, I see.
if we could then place some signage outside of the
Yeah,
area.
I can talk to you tomorrow or whenever it's convenient about
Okay.
temporary signage that could
Yeah.
be permitted. There is a way to go about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're gonna proceed to our fifth and final case. This is for V 23-02 SNP WV 1470 Earl Cole Road, request by CD Neon on behalf of SNP WV, West Virginia, for variance relief from Article 1369 of the city's planning and zoning code concerning signage design standards, City Tax District 14, Tax Map 31, Parcel 99 in the B5 shopping center district.
Right, thank
Yep,
you.
Go ahead.
So this request is for variance relief on behalf of SNP West Virginia for wall signage at their storefront. The sign is totaling 41, just over 41 square feet. The subject property is a multi-tenant commercial strip in the Zone B5. Although it does abut a residential zone, there's a considerable distance between the building and that zone. And the proposed signage faces away from the residential area onto Earl Core Road. The applicant provided a historic picture of the street view of the grocery store that used to be at this end of the building, and now the proposed split of that into two businesses, two establishments. Because of the sign area is determined by the width of the tenant space, SNP West Virginia is taking up a small portion of this existing building. The maximum allowed area of signage is 0.6 square feet per linear foot, which would result in a sign
24.6?
of 24.6. So in this case, if you take a step back and look at the building from the street, it's a considerable distance away from the street, and it's a large building. So
Right.
The tenant is somewhat hamstrung by the size of their tenant space within the overall building. So considering that, and considering the distance from the street, staff would recommend considering the variance in this request to the maximum allowable sign area. That concludes the staff report.
Hi,
Hello.
Crystal Miller, City Neon, 1095 Chaplain Road. So SNP West Virginia is a nonprofit organization that offers low-cost and no-cost spay and neuters for the community. So it works to better the community by preventing overpopulation of cats and dogs. And I believe they offer some other various services on surgery day for the animals that go in. They generally, at this time, they're only doing surgeries 2 to 3 days a week due to staffing issues because they have a small staff and a high volunteer. They will have anybody with veterinary science experience come in and volunteer. So 2 to 3 surgery days, but they pack in as many surgeries as they can per day, anywhere between 80 and 150 a day. So wayfinding becomes important when you have that many surgeries in a day. You have that many clients coming in. They're one of the few low-cost, no-cost spay and neuter clinics in North Central West Virginia, so they have a clientele coming from out of town. There is no ground signage for this particular end of the building. Advanced is on the ground signage with, I believe it's Automax. There's another building across from the Advance that has, I want to say, 4 tenants in it. That has a pylon sign, but this end of the property does not. So they do not have an opportunity to install ground signage. So they would like to make the sign a little bit more visible from the 100-foot plus setback there along, what is that technically? Route 7?
Earl Core.
Earl Core.
Core.
Yeah.
It's 7 too.
Yeah.
So which is pretty busy and sometimes gets highly congested with traffic. So you kind of need to know where you're going
Right.
before you get there.
Right. So it's just, for the record, it's just the variances for the area.
Correct. I
Okay.
believe it's 14 square feet.
Yeah.
So Ms. Miller. Excuse me?
16.4.
16.4.
So I had a question about the it says on the, it says, would like to install internally illuminated, which I'm not opposed to, of course. But what is raceway mounted channel letter? Is that something different than we've seen on other buildings? Is that's not gonna be racing and,
No, okay, if you can see the light gray area behind the SNIP WV, that is a raceway. And the purpose
Oh.
of that is so, well, one, you have an uneven building facade with that, I guess that's split
right,
cement stone.
Like stucco.
well,
So that gives a bumpy surface, which is hard to apply flush mount channel letters to.
Okay.
So you put a raceway behind the channel letters. You put less holes in the actual wall because you don't have to put holes per, like 3 holes in an S. You would
Okay.
just have along the
the
raceway.
channel.
And that
Okay.
kind of protects your property owner's building from excessive holes in the exterior.
If I might add, the channel letters just mean that the letters are standalone versus being on a, one big sheet with,
Uh-huh.
like a white background.
Okay,
Similar to the lanes was just the letter.
okay,
And then the raceway is just, that's attached to
back.
the building, and then the sign's attached to that.
okay.
So the letters could be switched out if there were a new tenant?
Yes.
Okay.
Potentially.
Okay.
And then in terms of the illumination, is it just the letters, or the raceway as well?
The raceway is not illuminated. It is painted to match the background of the building
Oh.
so that it's not even visible. The letters will be illuminated as
Right.
well as the puppy and kitten, and then the pillbox below it that says spay and neuter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
Public hearing.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to this case, now is your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we're going to close the public hearing for V 23-02. The findings of fact are very straightforward.
Yeah,
And I'd just like to state, I mean, the requested, there's a tenant next door. This sign is, it looks as if it's even slightly smaller. It's not out of proportion with
the other.
the adjacent tenants.
Mm-mm.
It's modest.
Yeah, it's a modest
Modest,
aerial
that's good
request.
word.
So I'm gonna move to accept the findings of fact for case number V 23-02. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. How do we vote to accept?
Aye.
Aye.
We vote to accept the findings of fact for case number V 22-02.
And I move we grant the variance for them, and I think we could use a spay and neuter center for low cost. Anyway,
Yes. And we should state, correct me if I'm wrong, no conditions?
Correct.
okay.
No conditions. So we have a motion to grant the variance for
With
this
no
case.
conditions.
With no
Second.
conditions. We have a second. How do we vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Miller, we have granted your variance request. No, you're fine. As you well know, written confirmation, 7 business days approximately. Any work done that your client does in that 30-day window is at that client's sole financial risk, because it is subject to appeal to the Circuit Court of Mon County. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Do we have announcements?
No announcements, but briefly, if Bill would you like to just come introduce yourself and the board can
Yeah,
introduce?
why don't you, thank you.
Yeah, from the podium is fine.
Sure. So, I think I've met you two, the two of you. So I'm Billy Plyler. I guess my real name is William, but I don't go by that.
Sorry to interrupt. You prefer Billy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm the new member on the board.
Okay.
Excited to do this. Just a brief bit of my background. So I have an architecture background, and I taught in interior architecture at WVU for a long time, and now I'm running a construction consulting business.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's me.
Okay.
What part of town do you live in?
I live in the first ward, and I actually am very familiar with the Mississippi Avenue
Hmm.
Case.
case.
Mhm.
Well, Billy,
Yeah.
good to have you, and my name's Heidi. Good to meet you.
Yeah, do you want to introduce yourselves, just
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
briefly where you
Chris,
live?
I'm Chris, and I'm Jer here, and
I'm
been
Logan.
on the board for a while now. Yep, we enjoy, or I enjoy, the work that we do here on the board. It's very, it's interesting. Thank
Mhm.
you, Ms. Miller.
Thanks. Thank you. Looking forward to having you on board.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
The only other
Welcome.
thing, the Development Services Director, Mr. Yeager, organized a brief tour of the new, well, what's happening at the old City Hall. It's been pretty much gutted out. You can actually see how it was a fire station at one time. And there was a lot gone, but I wish it was further along, but you can
These
start to
things take
see
time.
the vision. Council Chambers has been pretty much wrapped. They're not really touching that at all, so don't expect much changes in there.
Good.
I did know
That would
that
be
It's a
unfortunately, under the drop
historical.
ceiling is
Yeah.
a beautiful plaster ceiling that
Oh, really?
Wow.
was now currently exposed, so we'll see what they do with that. I hope they open that up, at least a portion.
Yes.
So does it, I mean, is it the teens? Does it date to the teens?
That's an excellent question. I should know that. Shame on me. I don't know the exact year.
Or maybe
I would
older
say
than that?
late teens, 20s.
Yeah, okay. That's what I would guess.
Yeah, we've a neat old picture.
It'll
They
be
had
worth the
horses
wait when
pulling.
they're done.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, that's about right. There was a horse-drawn. You could, like, I
Oh,
think.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's really neat
It'll be good
That-
to see it when it's done.
for sure.
All
All right, thank you all.
right, thank you, Mr. Pyler. So you don't have any other,
Nope.
you don't want to comment on
Announcements.
the gun,
The gun?
the zoning,
Oh,
or is it too early?
I'm not
Maybe
sure
comment
exactly
on
where
that?
that's at, so I don't. Yeah,
Maybe it's
I'm
still
not the
in
best to
draft.
What do you
comment.
mean?
Well, I think they're drafting language
To do?
with respect to well, there's just an article in the Dominion Post about that.
I'll check on the status and shoot you an email.
Or the
if you're
master
curious.
plan,
You have to help me out.
Comp plan is
it's coming along.
it's coming.
There's going to be a second comment period,
Very
right?
much, yeah.
In April, next month,
Um,
or maybe they push it
yeah,
out a
that
little
might
farther.
be pushing it. Probably May,
Yeah.
June.
Good.
So yeah, we're just trying to, kind of make this initial draft better,
Solid.
a solid, a good draft.
Right.
We weren't it wasn't exactly where we were expecting it to be, so the consultant is taking a little bit more time to, put a little more critical thinking and just a better overall product. So I hope the delay is worth it.
Can you
It
give
will.
me a
By the time
summary?
it gets
I'm
done,
not-
we'll have to do
can
it
you give me a
again.
summary? I'm not sure what
The
exactly.
Well, just the
comprehensive
master-
plan,
yeah, go ahead.
So the
The
comprehensive
10-year
plan is the
comprehensive.
long-range vision document. It needs to be updated every 10 years.
Okay,
So
for the city.
for the city, yeah, and it's everything from, general policies and goals and objectives, and then looking at strategies to implement those. Some of it is with land. Most of my attention is spent on the chapter related to land use, but there's, we look a little bit at transportation, overall. So, yeah, I'll
And
be
two,
happy
they're-
to send that
They're
out.
probably having to take into account like ARPA allocated funds, federal funds, to try to determine how those should be.
I think most of those have been allocated, so I'm not
Has
sure how much
they?
more there is
Oh,
to be
alright.
allocated. Yeah, that's not really in the plan.
Oh, it's not, okay.
Yeah. Ideally, that what was allocated should have been consistent with that plan, but I'm not sure. I was before my time.
Right.
Still on the air.
Yeah. So, do we have a motion to
I
adjourn?
move we adjourn.
We have a
Second.
motion to adjourn. We are so hereby adjourned.
Thank you.
Wait till it goes off.